Welp, it's finally time. After dropping a mention of it in the Kingdom Hearts 3 video, I have finally got around to creating a video reviewing the DLC of Kingdom Hearts 3. Hey, that rhymed. Known as Kingdom Hearts Remind, this DLC was touted by many as the savior of this game, as this DLC went on to add a lot to the game's finale, which was to address the complaints that many people had with the game's final act, and came with a big update that added a lot to the main game itself. So much so that when people think of Kingdom Hearts 3, this DLC is known as the title that saved the main game. It finally made it lay good. But did it really? I'm someone who liked the main game of Kingdom Hearts 3. Don't get me wrong, it had its problems, but I still ended up enjoying it. Just like this DLC. I enjoyed it, but I never really thought it saved the game. But that was then, and this is now. And after going through all of these games again on this long journey, it made me curious about how Remind holds up, as the Kingdom Hearts savior so many called it. Originally this was just going to be part of the 3 review in all honesty, but I had a lot more to talk about then, alongside packing up for my vacation, which I'm back now from, so bada boom. And in the end it was just like, alright, I'll save it for a later video. And now here we are. So it's time to take a look at Remind. What did it do right? What opportunities were missed with it? And if it truly was what saved Kingdom Hearts 3. I think that's enough talking. Let's get into it. Now, unlike most of my other reviews on this channel, I'm just going to go ahead and skip over talking about how the game looks in terms of graphics. It's the same engines as 3, it looks as nice as 3, so I'd rather spend that time talking about the gameplay and story changes instead of just, again, how it looks. So, while Remind still plays exactly like base Kingdom Hearts 3, as you would probably come to expect, it's a DLC of the 3rd game, Remind and the update that came with it added a lot to the gameplay. First was a plethora of new techniques. New finishers, to techniques focusing on counter moves. You can tell the devs over at Osaka Team, the crew behind pretty much all of the recent Kingdom Hearts games, were listening to genuine feedback on how to improve the gameplay of 3 and ran with it in the best ways possible. To the point where it feels like the perfect combination of Kingdom Hearts style combat. It's one of those aspects about it that makes me very curious about how 4 plans to implement this with the reaction commands coming back. Of course, new abilities for combat were not the only thing added in this big update. You could now unlock Oathkeeper and Oblivion as usable Keyblades. Oathkeeper is unlocked simply by beating the game or just opening up your beaten game and getting the postcard, dropping it off at Twilight Town, and boom, there you go. Oblivion is a little more tricky. You have to beat the game like Oathkeeper, but you gotta beat it on critical mode. Yeah, the biggest thing about this update was the fact that you could now play critical mode, and it is brutal. It is probably the single most difficult critical mode ever made for this series. And that's not a complaint. I'm saying this as a genuine compliment. It's fantastic that the difficulty so many people wanted from this franchise's final entry in the Xehanort saga is finally in the game. And it feels great to defeat bosses in this critical mode, even if you might rip your own ballsack off in anger at some of the boss fights in the process. So by now, you're probably wondering, why on earth is this idiot focusing on the update when this is about the Remind DLC? Well, for one, I wanted to extend the time of my video. Yes, I'm using it for my evil plans to make this video longer to get noticed in the YouTube algorithm more. I apologize for betraying your trust like that. My public execution for this grave error will be next Wednesday. I have to have some time to play Trails at least. And the other is that, well, considering that this came out around the same time Remind did, it's really hard to talk about how the DLC pushes Kingdom Hearts 3 to a new level without bringing this update up in conversation. The many things that it added really helped push this DLC to new heights. But that's pretty much it for the update editions. So what else did the Remind DLC add into this game? Well, now in certain story events, you can fight the final bosses using other characters. You now have the option to wreak havoc as Riku, Aqua, Roxas, and even Kairi. Yeah, for the first ever time in Kingdom Hearts history, Kairi is a playable character. She's also one of the most fun characters to play as. Yeah, I said it. Playing as a woman is fun, don't at me. Of course, now having the option to play as other characters leads to one of the greatest scenes in Kingdom Hearts history. And no, I don't mean the one where Goofy dies and Mickey crashes the fuck out. It's a scene that happens at the very end of the DLC, where after Sora goes to face Xehanort, the clones of him descend onto the Keyblade wielders. So in order to fight back, they put their backs towards each other and work together to fight them off. It's easily one of the coolest scenes I've ever seen in a franchise. Seeing all of these generations of Keyblade wielders, new and old, fight together for the first ever time puts one of the biggest, stupidest smiles on my face every time I think about it. Although, that wasn't the best part. No. That definitely came afterwards. When we cut to all of the heroes of light have been defeated. No! All that's left is one Mickey Mouse, who, despite everything looking to be at its absolute bleakest, stands up to face Xehanort all by himself. It is easily one of the coolest scenes in the entire franchise, made better when you realize that every time you're knocked down, you get back up. It's so fucking hype, and it really just encapsulates the energy that I love so much about this series. Then once you finally beat the game, you unlock the secret episode, where you get a bunch of one-on-one battles with immensely hard bosses that really test your skill, and I adore it. This was the kind of secret boss rush level of challenge that I wanted from Kingdom Hearts 3. Learning through trial and error to defeat all the organization members was amazing, and ending it all with Yozora possibly being one of the best boss fights I've ever partaken in was just icing on the cake. Easily some of the most fun I've had with a DLC and the series hands down. And that's really all I have to say about gameplay. So let's get to talking about story and characters next. They're fine. Characters are still as good as they've always been, and the story is on the light side with the DLC. It's mainly just an explanation for why Sora disappears at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 and how he saved Kairi. It's very straightforward and to the point, but there are some things I really like about it. For one is the more looming feel of dread it has. Yeah, sure, you're going back in time and saving Kairi, but everyone constantly telling Sora that the power of waking is gonna basically kill him from existence as he continues to use it is interesting. It gives you this hopeful yet sinking feeling in your stomach that while you're saving Kairi, you're also basically killing Sora at the same time. You know how this is gonna end, and well, it isn't pretty. Which leads to my second favorite part of the story. And that's how little Sora seems to be worried about all of this. I don't mean the fact that he's just stupid or something like that. More, he knows the consequences, and as in total character of himself, he doesn't care as long as he gets to save the people he cares about. It's one of the most in-character things he's ever done, and I love it. It reminds me a lot of him in Kingdom Hearts 1, where he was perfectly okay with ending his life as long as it means he could save Kairi. I love shit like that from him. And I'm really hoping that level of characterization becomes the norm for 4, because it's always a treat to see. Well, that's all I really have to say about the characters and story, so let me get into praising the music. It's still as perfect as it's always been. You know, it's Yoko, so you shouldn't be surprised that the soundtrack is S tier. It's like being surprised that water is wet at this point. Although one track in particular I want to give a shout out to is the Yozora boss fight. I think it's called Nacht Flugel? I don't really know how to pronounce it, but that song alone, and especially its opening, sends chills down your spine. It's telling you, you're not prepared for what's about to happen. Get ready. It's beautiful, it's haunting, and it's probably one of my favorite Yoko works ever. With that said, those are my pros. So now let's move on to my cons. Okay, so while I was going over what I think was a con of this DLC, I actually, truth be told, didn't find a whole lot. I only came up with 3 complaints. I really just couldn't think of many things that made me mad about this DLC. So I'm just going to list those off one by one, and then we'll move on to my final thoughts. So first off, I wasn't exactly a huge fan of how they reused a lot of bosses in this, until the second half of the DLC came around. I get the concept here, time travel, makes sense you'll see the same characters over and over, but man, I do wish those sections where you were going to interrupt key moments came with like different variations of boss fights. Like when we entered Ventus's heart, did we really need to fight the same sword Heartless we fought as a secret boss in 3? Was it really hard to make like a Heartless Ventus or something? It's a very minor complaint in the grand scheme of things, but I don't know, it always just felt like a missed opportunity to me. My second complaint has to do with how they implemented turning out the attraction commands. So I haven't really mentioned it yet, but in the Remind DLC, one thing they did address was how you could turn off attractions. You know that thing I complained about in the original review? If you've watched that, go watch that by the way. Yeah, you can do that now. And on one hand, I'm happy Square listened to the feedback many players had and offered a way to get rid of them. My major gripe with it comes from the fact that, you can only turn these off if you play critical mode. Which, personally, I think is stupid. Why the hell is that even an option? Everybody complained about it because the attractions were annoying. I get the fact that you want to offer that as a concept, but just put it on every difficulty. It makes zero sense to me why every difficulty doesn't have this as an option. I love critical mode. I love the challenge, but some people aren't going to be interested in that and just don't like the attractions in general. Sorry if it seems like a bit of an outburst, but I just don't get why it was done this way. Other than that though, let's get into the third complaint, which is probably my biggest, and that's just how underwhelming the new area you explore, Scala Akrim, was to navigate. Now, when I saw it in the Remind trailer that we were going to explore this new world, as opposed to only having a boss fight there, God, I was hyped! It was such a cool world from the very little we saw of it, so getting to finally explore it would have been awesome. Plus, seeing those cool things in it, like being able to traverse the city using the power of light, was rad. And then we got to traverse it, and I was very disappointed with how immensely short it was. You only really get 2 to 3 areas to explore, and while they're pretty decently sized, feels like it's over in less than half an hour. I said this earlier, and I'm gonna have to say it again for this one. Real wasted potential here. Missed opportunity 120%. This could have been a great section to lore drop about the next game series, or include some more boss fights like a Shadow Keyblade wielder, or a battle against one of the first ever Keyblade Masters. Just something to give it more substance than just running through a few areas. I don't know, maybe it's because they wanted to focus more on the final boss fights. Other than that, I have no other cons, so let's get into my final thoughts. So, after looking through all of this DLC goodness with its highs and its lows, I think I've come to a conclusion. I don't think Remind fixed Kingdom Hearts 3, mainly because I never thought there was anything that needed to be fixed, other than some problems that did deserve to be criticized. It was a solid game when it released. The DLC just makes it better all in all. That's why my final rating for this DLC is a pretty positive 8 out of 10. Definitely worth buying and playing if you want to see more of Kingdom Hearts 3, and treat yourself to some of the best boss battles in the series. With that, we are finally done with the video. Thank you all so much for watching. We're now one game away from finally being done with the Kingdom Hearts franchise, and honestly, I'm gonna miss it. Before I do my like sub thing though, I want to say thank you all so much for following me on this journey. It's been a long but absolute blast reviewing my favorite series of all time, and I've appreciated so many of you joining and enjoying what I do. I'll try to get the Melody review out soon, and if you want to be there for it day one, do me a favor and like and sub down below. Hit the bell to get notifications for when my videos go up. We're on the way to 1K, and I think we can do it soon. And finally, leave a comment if you're up for a chat or just want to help me in the algorithm. That's all, folks. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time for more RPG content.